What do you find as the biggest difference if somebody were to say, what's the difference between play to earn and play and own?
I think the thing that jumps out for me out of the gate is the mindset that is projected right away from anyone who's participating. To me, when you're advocating the earning potential and the ROI and the money making opportunities of your project, you are putting those ahead of the fact that you're supposed to be providing entertainment value and you're supposed to be providing something that people actually give a shit about, namely like a game of some kind. And I think that when you're not leading with the fact that you're a game and that there's actual fun to be had, you're basically projecting the expectations that are going to be put upon the audience that are consuming it. And if people are not legitimately having fun and if they don't care about what they're doing, they're not going to have a reason to stick around for a long time.
Cool. And the devil's advocate part of that would be that earning is fun. And so, if I invest in a stock and it goes up, it's a lot of fun to me, even if I didn't have to participate or do anything. If I'm if I put it in, it goes down. Obviously, it's not a lot of fun. So I could say that earning is part of the fun, and maybe that's why certain people are in there. I certainly understand that we as Play and Own, and by the way, I'm certainly playing devil's advocate here
No, I love
for
it.
conversation, not because I don't believe in everything. I just want to kind of see that would be the common answer that says, well,
Longevity is the way that I think you compete because earnings are not something that has been historically been able to be demonstrated to be consistent and reliable. And I think that it's easy and it's yes, it's very fun when there's earnings and there's money to be made when things are all going up. But it's what's more important is remembering the fun that you are or are not having when the earnings are not there or when things are going down.
cool. I think the longevity is such a cool word there. I think about that play and earn has this connotation that people are trying to extract from an ecosystem or from a community. And when I think of play and own, we all understand that we can give into the ecosystem, and with that, we can all make the entire ecosystem more valuable. And that happens over time. And that if we're all owning and contributing and participating and helping to grow the community and create more fun, a more social experience, a more collaborative and connected experience together, that we can build something that more and more people want to be a part of. And if more and more people want to be a part of it, it means that as we're owning things, those become more valuable with a simple kind of economics of supply and demand.
I felt like play to earn became synonymous with working to earn in a gaming and context where games like really sacrifice the gameplay to focus much more on like value extraction, and then everything kind of became an optimization of trying to make as much money as you could or to bring in as many people as possible to make said money and incorporate it in some sort of larger architecture like a guild. And so in that sense, they be kind of transitioned away from being a game and really more of just gaming to work or working to game, and there that had just a very different feel to it and certainly a different alignment of priorities. Whereas the play and own, in my mind, with like my first reaction there is you can play or own. It's like really more of an and or as opposed to doing the same thing, um, or having to make a choice between the two. And the owning part of it is that comes alongside with blockchain. So you can do that for kind of the first time in a way that really wasn't true ownership in Web 2, and you can do that now inside of Web 3, and games that are kind of like missing that are probably going to be left behind here over the next couple of years.
I think what you had hit on, which is that now that we have this idea of ownership, there's a number of ways that you can participate in a gaming economy without just simply spending time in front of a screen or a device where you're actually playing the game, right? And so part of the game is as I'm owning assets and growing assets within the game, what am I doing with those assets? How am I redeploying those? How am I choosing to stake or farm? Am I choosing to go breed? Am I choosing to go take those to the marketplace and grow in our game, our colony or whatever, get more weapons or unlock new levels? Am I doing it to go unlock parts of the game that may make it more fun for me with new levels or VIP or, all these things? And so I think that's one of the things that's really, really attractive to me is that it brings a whole number of people that are traditional gamers.
If I want to bring a guild into a game, what am I doing? We saw back in the days of Axie, guilds were being created purely for value extraction. I'm going to create a guild. I'm going to hire some people in the Philippines. They're going to play a game for me. I'm going to give them some money that's better than what they could earn in the real world doing normal jobs. And I'm going to take a percentage of that. It was a business model that guild owners thought they could profit on. Obviously, it didn't work out like that at the moment, and so it's changed. But what I saw happening in the Web3 crypto space was the exact same thing that I saw happening in games like Dota 2, in Call of Duty, where there was an MMR or a competitive nature, and there was a lot of toxicity. Everyone loves everyone when it's good, and everyone hates everyone when it's bad. And so what it does to me is it reminds me of house ownership. I know there's people that can own a house and they can flip it and they can make profit. I know there's business models. But if you buy a house, you buy it not to earn money from it. If anything, a house is a liability, not an asset, because of what it costs you. But people buy a house to live in. It's ownership of that house. If in the future you sell that house, you hope that the market is favorable and you hope that you might make some profit. And history has shown us that it's profitable to sell property after you've owned it for a period of time. The idea of extracting value out of a community that's still growing, it's a bit like taking food from a baby. I think it's too early to be taken out of these projects that are still trying to navigate this space and grow.
And I saw that, and I realized that guilds were the kind of the cause of that this guild scholarship relationship, and that was one of the things that put Axie on the map, and it was one of the things that ultimately became probably their biggest challenge. And I didn't want to face that challenge when we were building our game, and so I was very clear internally with our team that guilds were kind of a necessary evil, in that they can bring a lot of players, they can bring daily actives, and they can bring activity to an ecosystem or to a game. But the problem is that they are there to extract, they're there to earn. And I had a couple conversations with you and a couple other guilds, Rebirth, and I kind of asked this question, like, what's in it for us to allow you guys, or to advantage you, or to give you guys early access, or anything, or just even to give you regular access into our game? What's in it for you? Because I see you coming in and taking all of the money that should be spread out equally to all of my players who aren't necessarily professional. And the answers that I kept getting started to change my mindset. And it was that they said, listen, if we're investing all of this time into your game, we care about how healthy your game is 12 months, 24 months, 36 months from now, just as much as you do. The last thing that we want to do is be, like you said, as this economy or this ecosystem or this game, it's young. It still needs to mature before we can actually really start to realize what the value of this can be. If we're pulling out of that early on, it's like a growing business trying to pull all the profits off the table. You need to be reinvesting that back into the business. And that's exactly what guilds do for a game, is that they actually come in and they bring a lot of attention to the game, but they also reinvest back into building their assets and building this ownership. And they really care about building that over time. And for us as the game developer, it became about creating other syncs in the game. And syncs can be really positive too. I mean, Farmville, we talked about the Zynga stuff, was built on people. It was all about syncs. It was just about cosmetic upgrades and flexing, and people loved that. And that was fun, right? And so syncs don't always have to be, I mean, we go to arcades, that's a sync. We pull quarters out of our pocket and put them into a machine because we enjoy playing. And so there's nothing wrong with building syncs in a game and allowing that currency or that token or those assets to move around within an economy. And for us as a game developer, that's how we can build a really sustainable ecosystem, is through sound tokenomics, sound game mechanics, and enough different player loops so that we can attract a number of different people, that it can support guilds and scholars, or it can also support regular players. It can support casual players. It can support people who just want to own the assets. Maybe it's the land, which is passive ownership, or maybe it's owning the in our game the NFTs and renting them out to other people who want to go play on their behalf. And all of that can certainly work. And as long as the game developer builds something that's really, really fun, that has sound tokenomics and sound mechanics, I realized that was my challenge, not fending off guilds. My challenge was simply to build an ecosystem where everybody could thrive, and that guilds could actually be a huge driving force to what we're doing, because they care just like us. They care about the sustainability and the long-term health of the ecosystem.
Mine is somewhat anticipatory in that, like, our game right now is not exactly free to play, because you need to have purchased an early access pass to get into the game. So it's not necessarily symptomatic of what we will see. But what I think we have generated a substantial amount of interest in is kind of like hardcore gamers, where they were used to spending like a lot of money on skins and identifying features inside of more Web 2 type games. But now they realize like, hey, you need not compromise on gameplay in order to get that same level of ownership and incorporate it into Web 3. And that's what we're kind of able to do in our game, where our cosmetic NFTs can be truly owned by those users and by those players. And whereas, you know, you had some people who spent some serious amount of time on Axie and other similar early generation blockchain type games, but they weren't really like the hardcore gamers that are that really pride themselves on their kind of gameplay ability and like ability to give feedback as you would see in other traditional PC or console games. So I think we're getting a much more receptive audience from or an accepting feedback from that type of audience, which is a great way to kind of bring more Web 2 type gamers into the Web 3 environment.
So yeah, so we've been using the phrase "play and own" since I think like maybe middle of February or maybe a little bit earlier, and have really kind of dug into this as part of our core philosophy and beliefs behind what we're building. I think a lot of this sprung from my own personal experiences growing and learning inside of the Web3 space, watching and listening to many of the people inside the Axie Infinity community. Myself, I've managed like 6 different scholar teams and dealt with sort of like I'm very much about dog fooding and the notion of like understanding things at its most like core level. So, I've managed teams, I've spoken with tons of Axie scholar managers, and really kind of dug into the ethos of what I thought was missing or was working inside of these communities. And then to me, at its core level, was this idea in which there was no actual agency and ownership amongst these relationships between scholars and scholar managers, but it created all of this upward pressure and upward required layers of middle management in order to actually keep it all running sustainably, where you have to have all these managers and people managing all the sort of workers below them and dealing with the management of assets and multiple accounts and all this kind of, it just seemed like it was completely unnecessary if it was designed properly. And that was really where the notions of like player ownership and owning your own assets really kind of like clued in for us, and we really realized that that was the sort of the key piece of what makes all of these things actually grow and thrive properly is when you actually own your things. That's really what it all matters. And for us, we've had this as a component for the resources and the sort of resource economy inside of our game since the beginning. But it wasn't always the case. With land, you really had to always buy it and acquire it. It wasn't something that you really had a path to ownership for, even if you didn't have the means. And so we've actually created a path to ownership that exists for players that just start off as scavenging or working or doing jobs inside of our game for other players. And we've found that giving them a path to ownership results in players that are more invested in the game, that take pride and reinvest their earnings and really want to just play more and increase um, their overall sort of horizontal and vertical progression inside of the game. And I think that that's really like the key to most of these things is when you actually own your things, you understand the value that they're worth, and you gain a actual understanding and financial a degree of like financial understanding about like what these things are actually worth. And I think that that's something that's been lacking a lot in the sort of like play to earn space, in which you are basically being sponsored by someone else to use their things to play a game. I don't really think you get that piece that's really important. But that same talk I'm giving at the conference is already pinned on YouTube. You can listen to it. It's largely where my entire thesis is built around sort of explaining the model that has evolved that we've seen in this space, where we started out with this notion of bringing gamification to DeFi, where we've seen these ideas of like staked tokens that you earn a yield on, that you're able to like reinvest, and then you're able to then leverage profits off of that. And you, as more people come into this, you're basically just selling the bag to the next person. And this like gamified DeFi thing worked really well early on, but it sort of seemed to be a bubble that kind of popped itself pretty fast, and we saw it largely on like Binance Smart Chain as one place, but it's existed in other places as well. We've seen that then evolve into doing NFT based gamified things, some largely in some of the sort of what I'll toss to Rand, who's in the chat here, is the breed rent Ponzi model, where effectively you are creating an artificial scarcity, you have a value creation loop that's tied into artificial demand, where you're limited to the number of accounts and assets that you're able to use yourself, which is sort of perpetuated into the scholar models and the distributed sort of breed rent system that is being propped up on a token. But all of these things are inherently unsustainable because there's not enough merit and underlying fundamentals that actually people care about, that when the money starts to dip or the attention starts to be divided into other things, that suddenly everything starts to collapse. And at the end, the fundamental sort of conclusion is that people need to be there for something that's engaging and fun and sustainable first, so that when the profits and the earnings are not there, that they're still suck around because they're actually still having fun, and they're part of something that at its core is more about the ownership of your invested time and money, and not about the commodification of people's time, into tokens that are being artificially inflated and have no real intrinsic or even extrinsic value that can be attributed.
What you had kind of mentioned is like the one thing that you control, or that we control as game developers, is how fun the game is, like what the actual mechanics of the game are, and how we create the story and the lore and and then everything else, the community and the token and the economy outside, and how all those things fluctuate are to some extent a byproduct of how fun we make the game. But there's also external factors that we don't necessarily control. The thing that we control more than anything is that NFT launch, like the value that we put behind the NFT, and how we promote it, and some of the mechanics that we put in place as we launch that NFT. And I want to do that first. I want to do the thing that I know that we control, so that we can signal to, as we have kind of future launches, that we can signal confidence to our audience.
So I think the market, the community, they'll create the value for what they think things are worth. But I think ultimately what it comes down to is time. How much time did I have to invest to get this asset? Or how much time do I need to invest to be able to get this asset in the game? And if I do not want to invest my time and I want a shortcut, then I'll go and buy it from another player. And how much is my time worth? Well, that's how much I'm willing to spend on that asset. And I think that is where you start to build up a healthy economy where it's player driven. And that's where I think the value can come from. I think it's very dangerous when these tokens, where there's no intrinsic value, but the idea that you can stake your tokens for the future promise of more tokens, and the only value in a token is the fact that you're locking it up